How can I have the audacity to put such thing in black and white? At that time, he decided to go bathe in the Ganges in hopes that perhaps some inspiration would come to him. Jayadev Goswami went off to take his afternoon bath while leaving his wife Padmavati behind to cook the offering for the deities. While he was away, Krishna arrived at his house in the dress of Jayadev. Krishna went over to Jayadev's writing desk and there found the sheaves of palm upon which the Gita Govinda was written. Krishna picked up Jayadev's pen and wrote the verse with the line, Dehi padapalavam mudram, wherein it says, Krishna bows his head to the lotus feet of Sri Radharani. With this, Krishna disguised as Jayadev sat down and took prasadam prepared by Padmavati. After finishing his prasadam, Krishna stepped outside and vanished. Just at that time, Jayadev returned from bathing at the Ganges. When he asked about prasadam, his wife was perplexed. When she told Jayadev what had just happened, Jayadev was astonished. Over to his book and saw there was wet ink in the verse he had thought of writing before he had gone to bathe in the Ganges. Dehi padapalavam udaram. Krishna bows down his head at the lotus feet of Sri Radharani. Upon seeing that verse, he said to Padmavati, It is a miracle. See here, what I told you, I was reluctant to write down has been written here exactly as I thought it. Tears of ecstasy flowed from his eyes as he understood the mystery of what had just transpired. Padmavati, he said, You are most fortunate. Krishna himself has written the line, Dehi padapalavam udaram, and accepted prasadam from your own hand. Okay, so that's just a little bit about Jayadev Goswami and how great of a personality he is that Krishna himself came and wrote some of his Gita Govinda. So does everyone have it pulled up? Dasavatar Stotra? Okay. Pralaya payodi jale drittavanasi vedam vihita charitam akedam. Pralaya payodi jale drittavanasi vedam vihita charitam akedam. Keshavasrita mina sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Putara re tishnati tava prishte dharani dharanakina chakra dharishte. Keshavadvrita kurma sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare
Sati Dashana Shikare Dharani Tava Bhagna Shashini Kalanka Kalevani Magna Keshavadrita Shukara Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Avakara Kamala Varena Madhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranya Kashipu Tanubhingam Madhuta Shringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Yasi Vikramane Bali Madhuta Vamana Padana Kanira Janita Jana Pavana Yasi Vikramane Bali Madhuta Vamana Padana Kanira Keshavadrita Vamana Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Ramaye Jagarapatadhapam Snapayasi Payasi Samita Bhavatapam Keshavadrita Pragupati Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Dikshurane Dikpati Kamaniyam Dashamukam Olimbahim Ramaniyam Keshavasreta Rama Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Pushi Vishare Vasana Saladabham Halahati Dhiti Matila Yamunabham Pushi Vishare Vasana Saladabham Halahati Dhiti Keshavrita Haladar Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Haladar Rupa Yajna videra Shruti dhatam Sadaya hridaya darshita pashugatam Keshavasrita Buddha Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Buddha Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare Nachani vahani dhane kalaya svikarabalam Jumake tumiyake napi karalam Nachani vahani dhane kalaya svikarabalam Jumake Keshavasrita Kalki Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Kalki Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare udaram Shinu sukadam shubhadam bhavasaram Shinu sukadam shubhadam bhavasaram Keshavadrita Dashavidarupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, So there's also a falashruti for this verse, which I'll read. Vedanudarhate jaganti vahate bhugolan udbidharate daityam daryate balim chayayate kshatra kshatyam kuruvate polasyam jayate halam kalayate karunyam antavante Lechan-nuchayate dashakriti krite Krishna yatubhyam namaha, which says that, O Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you, who appears in the form of these 10 incarnations. The form of Matsya you rescue the Vedas, and as kurma you bear the Mandara mountain on your back. As Varaha you lift the earth with your tusk, and in the form of Narasimha you tear open the chest of the Daitya, Hiranyakashipu. In the form of Vamana, you trick the Daitya king Bali by asking him for only 3 steps of land, and then you take away the whole universe from him by expanding your steps. As Parshuram, you slay all the wicked Kshatriyas, and as Ramachandra, you conquer the Rakshasa king Ravana. In the form of Balaram, you carry a plow with which you subdue the wicked. You subdue the wicked and draw toward you the river Yamuna. As Lord Buddha, you show compassion toward all the living beings suffering in this world, and at the end of Kali Yuga, you appear as Kalki to bewilder the Malechas. Shri Jayadev Goswami ki jai. Shri Gita Govinda ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Reading from 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 15, titled The Description of the Kingdom of God, text number 34. Does everyone have it pulled up? Tat Vam Amuṣya Paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ kartum prakṛṣṭam iha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām lokān itaḥ vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā pāpīyasah trayaḥ ime ripavaḥ asya yatra amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā.
That's not the one I chanted.
Oh, sorry.
I chanted the second one. So you can chant it. You can chant the second one.
prakṛṣṭam dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
pāpīyasas traya ripavo yatra
pāpīyasas traya ripavo yatra
amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā pāpīyasas traya ripavo yatra amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā pāpīyasas traya ripavo yatra Please chant.
amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
amuṣya paramasya
vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā pāpīyasas traya
ime ripavo yatra
amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
kartum prakṛṣṭamiha dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
lokānito vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
lokān vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
pāpīyasas traya ime ripavosya yatra
pāpīyasas traya ime ripavosya yatra tadvam amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ kartum prakṛṣṭam dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām lokān vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā pāpīyasas ripavo yatra
tadvam amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
tadvam amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
kartum prakṛṣṭam dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
kartum prakṛṣṭam dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
lokān vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
lokān vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
pāpīyasas traya ime ripavosya yatra
pāpīyasas traya ime ripavo yatra
tadvam amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
tadvam amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ
kartum prakṛṣṭam dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
prakṛṣṭam dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām
lokān vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
lokān vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā
pāpīyasas traya ime ripavosya yatra
pāpīyasas traya ime ripavo yatra tat therefore vam unto these two amuṣya of him paramasya the supreme vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ the Lord of Vaikuṇṭha kartum to bestow prakṛṣṭam benefit itaḥ in the matter of this offense dhīmahi let us consider manda-dhībhyām those whose intelligence is not very nice lokān to the material world itaḥ from this place Vaikuṇṭha vrajatam go antara-bhāva duality dṛṣṭyā on account of seeing pāpīyasaḥ sinful trayaḥ three ime these ripavaḥ enemies asya of a living entity yatra where Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Therefore, let us consider how these two contaminated persons should be punished. The punishment should be apt, for thus benefit can eventually be bestowed upon them. Since they find duality in the existence of Vaikuṇṭha life, they are contaminated and should be removed from this place to the material world, where the living entities have three kinds of enemies. Purport. The reason why pure souls come into the existential circumstances of the material world, which is considered to be the criminal department of the Supreme Lord, is stated in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, verse 27. It is stated that as long as a living entity is pure, he is in complete harmony with the desires of the Supreme Lord. But as soon as he becomes impure, he is in disharmony with the desires of the Lord. By contamination, he is forced to transfer to this material world, where the living entities have three enemies, namely desire, anger, and lust. These three enemies force the living entity to continue material existence. And when one is free from them, he is eligible to enter the kingdom of God. One should not, therefore, be angry in the absence of an opportunity for sense gratification. And one should not be lusty to acquire more than necessary. In this verse, it is clearly stated that the two doormen should be sent into the material world, where criminals are allowed to reside. Since the basic principles of criminality are sense gratification, anger, and unnecessary lust, persons conducted by these three enemies of a living entity are never promoted to Vaikuṇṭha loka. People should learn Bhagavad Gita and accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as the Lord of everything. They should practice satisfying the senses of the Supreme Lord instead of trying to satisfy their own senses. Training in Krishna consciousness will help one be promoted to Vaikuṇṭha. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Tadvam amuṣya paramasya vikuṇṭa-bhartuḥ kartum prakṛṣṭam dhīmahi manda-dhībhyām lokān vrajatam antara-bhāva-dṛṣṭyā pāpīyasas traya ripavo yatra. Therefore, let us consider how these two contaminated persons should be punished. The punishment should be apt, for thus benefit can eventually be bestowed upon them. Since they find duality in the existence of Vaikuṇṭha life, they are contaminated and should be removed from this place to the material world, where the living entities have three kinds of enemies. So this here is kind of the last, or towards the last bit of this controversy that we're having about the Kumaras and the doorkeepers, Jai and Vijay. After this, the Supreme Lord himself will come and appear to kind of sort out the matter. But here in this text, we have the Kumaras thinking about how they will bestow punishment upon the doorkeepers, Jai and Vijay. And this isn't exactly something that they're doing whimsically. This word, dhīmahi, it's a pretty strong and, I wouldn't exactly say common word, but it appears in a lot of famous places, I guess you could say. In the first canto of the Bhagavatam, we have the word dhīmahi. In that instance, it means to meditate upon very, very deeply. And also, I believe in the Gayatri mantra, there's the word dhīmahi. And this implies a deep sense of meditation and deep contemplation. Not exactly something that just pops into the mind or is whimsical. So when the Kumaras are considering what should be done with Jai and Vijay, this word dhīmahi is used here. And as we've been discussing, this whole situation here is completely orchestrated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, these aren't exactly common instances in the Vaikuṇṭha planets. And this story appears here, this pastime appears here in Srimad Bhagavatam to obviously glorify the Supreme Lord and His devotees, but also to teach us, to educate us on so many different points. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport here, he really brings out a lot of important points regarding to these three kinds of enemies which we have in this material world. In the purport, Prabhupada describes desire, anger, and lust. And this is referencing from, or I guess this is similar to the verse we find in Bhagavad Gita, talking about the three gates leading to hell. Trividam narakasyedam dvaram nashanam atmanaha kama krodas tatha lobas tasmad etad trayam tyajet. That there are three gates leading to this hell: lust, anger, and greed. So we can see here that desire and greed, they can be kind of implied interchangeably, because this desire that's being used here, it isn't just any desire, right? Buddha, he claimed that desire is the cause of all suffering. But this desire should be qualified. It isn't just any desire, but it's this material desire. Because ultimately, as has been pointed out many times, the want to be free of desire is also a desire. So there's the imminent contradiction of this desirelessness that some are aspiring for. So we can see that this material desire and greed can be kind of almost synonyms here used in this context. Krishna says about these three enemies that every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. And in Srila Prabhupada's purport here to the Gita, he says something extremely heavy, actually. Prabhupada says, a sane man who does not want to glide down to the species of demoniac life must try to give up these three enemies, which can kill the self to such an extent that there will be no possibility of liberation from this material entanglement. So, obviously we understand that, Jiver Svarupoi Krishna Nityadas, it's our eternal and constitutional position to be with Krishna. So, this isn't necessarily making that an impossibility, but it's just showing to the great extent how much these three enemies can really just bind us up in this material world and just cause us to completely forget Krishna, right? That's how we find ourselves here. And this lust, anger, and greed, they completely cause one to forget about Krishna. This chapter of the Gita where this verse is found is the divine and demoniac natures. So this here is describing one of demoniac mentality. And it's this demoniac mentality which Srila Prabhupada describes here as disharmony with the desires of the Lord. So Krishna, he's naturally Ishvara, Parama, Krishna, Sachidananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam. That Krishna is Ishvara. He's the supreme controller. He's Sachit Ananda, and he's Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of all causes. So, as long as our desire is to be in harmony, serving the Supreme Lord, as Vatsal Prabhu was mentioning yesterday, that as long as our desires are simply in harmony with the desires of the Supreme Lord, then everything naturally works in harmony. He was even making the nice point that Prabhupada, he didn't even have to mention the disagreements between other jivas, because when one is in harmony with the Lord, naturally all of the jivas are also in harmony, in serving the Lord. Whereas when that desire is in disharmony, naturally the jivas will also be in disharmony. Why? Because as long as one other person thinks, or a couple other people think that actually I'm the Ishvara, I'm the controller, I want to be the cause of something, I want to cause something, I want to do something, I want to do something great, right? Prabhu, he was giving this example of this monastery, and these monks, they were so humble that, right, this rabbi, he said that one of you is the Messiah. So they all thought that it was the other person. But I was thinking when Prabhu was giving this analogy that the exact opposite could have happened, where all of them could have thought, oh, he must be talking about me. How did he know all this time, but nobody else recognized that actually it was me who's the chosen one. It's me who's the greatest. It's me who is meant to save this monastery in this situation. So we can see that that's kind of the difference there in one who has a divine mentality and one who has a demoniac mentality. The demons, they're always thinking Ishvaro Ham Bogi, that they want to be in possession of more things, they want to be controlling more things, they want to be enjoying more things, not for anyone else, but they think that everyone else should be serving them and worshiping them. So this is the demoniac mentality that's being described here. And Srila Prabhupada, he specifically mentions this verse in the 7th chapter, verse number 27, where Krishna is specifically talking about knowledge of the absolute truth, but here Krishna is talking about those unintelligent people who don't have knowledge of the absolute truth. Before this verse, Krishna talks about those who he specifically mentions as unintelligent men who think he is impersonal, then becomes personal. Krishna uses the words mudhoyam, these foolish people who do not know that he is unborn and inexhaustible, and that Krishna is knowing of all things past, present, and future. People that don't realize these things, they have this lack of knowledge of the absolute, which Krishna is specifically talking about here. And this verse that Prabhupada is mentioning here, Icha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. O scion of Bharat, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. So, Prabhupada, in this purport here of the Gita, he he mentions that this sense of duality, it causes desire and hate. And all of these things, specifically this material desire, which will lead to hate, it's like I said, it's born of this similar separatist mentality. For one who thinks in a dualistic way, they see, okay, this is my friend, this is my enemy. This is good for me, this is bad for me. And Prabhupada, he cites a couple of these dualistic concepts. He says, such deluded persons symptomatically dwell in dualities of dishonor, honor, misery, happiness, woman and man, good and bad, pleasure and pain, etc., thinking, this is my wife, this is my house, I am the master of this house, I am the husband of this wife. These are the dualities of delusion. Those who are so deluded by dualities are completely foolish and therefore cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's why it's very important for us to give up these enemies, these three enemies which are being described, that for one who harbors even a slight tinge of these enemies, one is not eligible to go to the kingdom of God. That's how important it is for us to get above these things. And Srila Prabhupada, he mentions here that anger, it often arises from the absence of an opportunity for sense gratification. Right? We hear kama esha, krodha esha, rajaguna samudbhavaha, mahashano mahapatma, vidyenam ihaverinam. That from this lust or this desire for sense gratification, anger arises. So when one is desiring a certain opportunity for sense gratification or a certain sense object, and they don't get that sense object, or the circumstance doesn't pan out how they liked it. Has anyone else experienced this? Where you wanted something so bad, and either A, when you got it, it wasn't as good as you thought it was going to be, or B, you just never got it, and you just became so angry. You became so mad. You blamed your parents. You blamed your school. You blamed God. You blamed nature. You were angry at so many different things just because you didn't get a piece of momentary sense gratification, which is described as just a drop of water in a desert, right? So by having this mentality, we can easily see how easy one is prone to anger. When one is engaged in personal sense gratification, this anger is very easily brought about. And then Srila Prabhupada also says that one should not be lusty to acquire more than necessary. And this is mentioned. We also have in Ishopanishad, Isha vasya idam sarvam yatkinsha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjitaha magrada kasya svidhanam. That everything animate or inanimate that is within this universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself which are set aside as his quota. And one should not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong. So this is how one should be conscious. And Srila Prabhupada, he describes in his purport about all of these different things and how important it is for one not to accumulate more than what is necessary or to desire more than what is necessary. And if we think about it, we can very easily see, being in the brahmacharya ashram, that we actually don't need very much for our own personal self. We just need a couple of clothes, right? A little bit of food. On traveling Sankirtan, sometimes we have practical realization about how little food we can actually survive off of. And a little bit of water, just a small 6 feet of space to lay our body at night. and just a couple other small things that might be pertaining to the exact permutation and combination that makes up this material body out of the modes of material nature. But other than that, we really don't need so much. We recently packed up all of our stuff from Atlanta and moved it here. Most of us, just like a couple of cardboard boxes, we could fit everything that we own, everything that we needed to sort of keep this body and soul together. We also brought a lot of other stuff that we might not have needed. But at least for our own personal maintenance, and we could practically see how much stuff we had that we just didn't need. And that's just kind of chilling there in that barn. We have so much stuff that isn't even needed for what is necessary. And Prabhupada, he specifically mentions that one is lusty when they want to acquire more and more things than what is necessary. And this lust, it's super strong, it's super heavy. Me and Abhimanyu Sutsa Prabhu, we were reading in the Chaitanya Charitamrita when Mahaprabhu, he's going towards Vrindavan. He's on the path towards Vrindavan. He's thinking about leaving. And they want to send a servant with Mahaprabhu. But Mahaprabhu mentions how previously the servant they had sent with him, Kala Krishnadas, he got bewildered by the gypsies because of lusty desire. And in Srila Prabhupada's purport there, he mentions that lust is so strong that even if one may be in the personal association of the Supreme Lord, they can still fall into the maya of lusty desires. Kala Krishnadas, he was personally there serving Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he was still bewildered. And then after that, Prabhupada, he mentions that sometimes this lust is so strong that not even the Supreme Personality of Godhead can save one from their own lust, which is which is really extreme, actually. But we can see how worried and how I guess aware one should be about how destructive this lust is, right? This lust, anger, and greed, they're described as our enemies. One should not associate with them at all. One should not associate with lust, greed, and anger, or people who are prone to lust, greed, and anger. Because if we associate with such people who develop this consciousness and who develop this mentality, we may also begin to develop such a mentality. I know sometimes on book distribution, when we're not in the proper consciousness, if someone's very angry with us or someone acts very lustily towards us, or we see something very inducive of greed, we can even get disturbed, and it can affect our consciousness. It can make us angry towards those who we're trying to give books to, who we're trying to bring to a platform of Krishna consciousness. It can completely bewilder our mind from thinking about Krishna, thinking of the instructions of the spiritual master, thinking of Krishna's instructions in the Gita, to just being completely absorbed in the opposite sex, in sense gratification. And when one is in this consciousness, they'll find that it's impossible to actually distribute any books. And one can realize if they're honest with themselves that, wow, this angry person, their consciousness, it really rubbed off on me. It really impacted me. So we should be very, very careful, and we should always be thinking that, am I harboring any of these enemies, any of these three strong enemies of lust, anger, and greed. Because if we are, we'll just simply remain here in this material world. These enemies of lust, anger, and greed, they impact us so much. They cause us to make offenses to devotees. They cause us to make offenses to the holy name. They cause us to make offenses to the other jivas that we may be interacting with and meeting. So if one has this consciousness and mentality, they just simply won't be eligible to be promoted to the spiritual world, to the Vaikuṇṭha planets, or the place of no anxiety where the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself is residing. So it isn't all heavy, and it isn't all something we should be completely scared of, because Srila Prabhupada says that training in Krishna consciousness will help one be promoted to Vaikuṇṭha, and that one can overcome these three enemies of lust, anger, and greed by practicing satisfying the senses of the Supreme Lord instead of trying to satisfy their own senses. What's that verse? Atashi Krishna namadi na bhaved grahyamindriyai sevan mukhe hi jivado svayameva spuratyada. That we should engage all of our senses in satisfying Krishna, who is actually the master of the senses, and particularly this tongue. When one is enveloped in the material senses, they really have to use this tongue for, because the tongue has two purposes. It can speak and it can also taste. So by chanting about the name, form, glories, and pastimes of the Supreme Lord, and by taking Krishna prasadam, that's a very easy way, actually, for us to come out of that situation where we're simply bound up by these enemies and constantly being attacked by these enemies. And one can even have practical experience that when one is dealing with any of these, either lust or anger or greed, and they start to chant the holy name, or they start to think about the pastimes of the Lord, or they get absorbed in honoring prasadam with the proper consciousness, that these things, they'll simply go away. Right? It's described kind of like an itch, right? That at some points in time, the itching sensation, it's so strong. Especially for those who have had things like poison ivy and certain rashes, they know that sometimes the itching sensation is so strong that it's sometimes hard to even sleep. Oftentimes when one has something like this, they can't even sleep properly at night because the itching sensation is so strong. But there are times when even we have such a strong itching sensation and we just divert the mind to something else, something that's stronger than that itching sensation, one will go back and they'll realize, wait, where did this go? It completely disappeared. It's completely non-existent. So that's how we have to be in dealing with these enemies, At least speaking for myself, I can say that I'm still full of these three enemies of the living entity. But I can practically see that if any time these strong enemies come up, if I simply engage myself in a higher propensity and don't scratch that itch, don't go for any of those enemies of the conditioned soul, and instead, like I said, divert them to some higher purpose, some higher taste, some higher attraction, some higher engagement, higher activity. That I can have the firm faith that I can become free from these 6 enemies. We see that devotees, after practicing strictly, seriously, chanting their rounds, waking up for Mangalarti, following strictly and very emphatically these principles, we can see what is their character, what are their activities, what are they thinking about, right? And we can have firm faith that, yeah, if I also follow this process, I can also free myself from these enemies, and specifically if I serve these devotees who are not angry, who are not lusty, who don't have material desire, then we can get the mercy of these Vaishnavas, right? Like Jayadev Goswami, he was and he is so pure that Krishna himself, he came and he wrote in Gita Govinda that line that Jayadev Goswami was thinking about. So we shouldn't think ourselves on the level of Jayadev Goswami, but if we humbly submit and pray to Jayadev Goswami, who, to write something like the Gita Govinda, you have to be completely free of any lust, any anger, any greed. So on this disappearance day of Jayadev Goswami, we can humbly submit a prayer to Srila Jayadev Goswami, asking him to help free us from this lust, this anger, this greed, and not just simply pray and act as we're doing, but pray and also strictly follow. And by doing both of these things combined, we can really have firm faith that we'll be able to become free from these 3 enemies of desire, greed, anger, lust. And this way we can become completely purified and then, have blissful spiritual existence with the Supreme Lord in complete harmony. This chapter we're reading, description of the kingdom of God, that will be our reality. This will be our circumstance that we're in. Coming up, there's some beautiful verses describing the qualities and the bodily features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is something that we're reading about now and talking about now. But we know for those devotees like Jayadev Goswami, this is what they're actually seeing. When they read these pastimes, when they read about the descriptions of the Supreme Lord, they're actually seeing the Lord face to face. So yeah, please, if all of you could pray for and bless me that I can become free of these 3 kinds of enemies, that would be much appreciated. And we can take any questions, comments, or corrections anyone might have now. The mic's there for anyone who has something. Chandan?
I thought this was a good point you're making, that this desire, that the itching desire is there, but as soon as one kind of is engaged in something, then one can forget about that very quickly. One, just in the same kind of line of thought, was that this, I remember this climber was saying that, these people, they do like free climbing. It means you don't have any rope and you climb huge mountains or the cliff side of a mountain.
Yeah, sometimes
it's just straight up. It's like mountain goats, And he was saying that he's been doing it for a long time, and he says that even experienced people, they die, because they start getting laxed. They've climbed so many times, and they've done so many times they've gone up the same mountain, and they know it so well, and they start becoming relaxed. And as soon as they become relaxed, they drop to their death. Now, the whole activity is stupid, but the point is made again and again in different kind of circumstances that as soon as one starts to think that I'm free, now I can kind of just cruise. I don't have to try so hard. I don't have to engage so much in devotion service. I'm good. I'm free, and I'm like a pure devotee now. Then one starts to fall immediately because we're never free. of those lusty desires until we have Krishna prema, where we've reached that platform. But if one starts to think, okay, now I got it, now all I have to do is just whatever, I can just cruise back to Godhead, then immediately then he's captured by Maya. So one just has to be, the intensity is remained, then all the other desires are in one sense just overcome, one transcends it, but it's still there. But as soon as one starts to become lax and is not focused on chanting his rounds in the morning properly, we're not reading Prabhupada's books regularly, we're not engaging in devotional service, and then all these other desires come, and then we become disturbed, and then we wonder why we're disturbed. But as soon as you get like a service that you can kind of like engage all your mind in, and then sometimes we think, oh, this is too much, there's like so much service. But then when that service goes away, you're like, I wish I had that service. It's like, now my mind is just disturbed. So sometimes the jiva is like that for the sense gratification, because sometimes we think service, I'm doing so much service, what about me, what about my... But then when that goes away, then we realize, oh, okay, cool, now I need to be engaged, and we need to remain engaged. So it's a good point.
Yeah, and on that same point, we can see our acharyas, who are, liberated personalities who don't have any of these problems, Prabhupada, he himself asked for the benediction of fighting till his last breath, like Arjuna, and we can see that our acharyas also, they follow in that example, that they don't just like show that, oh yeah, towards the time of death they like start doing things that are very questionable or very lax, but Prabhupada till the very end, speaking the purports of Bhagavatam, doing so much service and everything like that. So we can't imitate, but we can follow in that same mindset, that till the very last breath, we can be fighting, and that might change. Like His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, he's been releasing a lot of lectures recently on the Vanaprastha ashram. So what fighting against Maya might look like for one in different ashrams might be different, but the point is that fighting should keep on going till the very end, fighting till that very last breath. So.
Just quick, sorry. Just saying that sometimes it can be discouraging also, because we have these desires, they come up, and then we go, well, why do I need to try so hard? Anyways, I'm like this, I can't, I've been trying for so long, and it's not working, so anyways, let me not go to Mangalarti, let me not, read Prabhupada's books. But one has to kind of constantly reassess oneself and not let the feelings get carried, because it's another part of sense gratification, that whole idea, oh, I can't overcome my anarthas, or I've been trying for so long. No, just keep trying, that's all. There's nothing else you can do. So the Prabhupada mentioned, or this pastime is there with Gajendra, just keep going on fighting, and then if one isn't strong enough to fight in the water, you should get on land and continue fighting.
Jai, thank you. Someone else said? Drishadina?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for the nice class. I found it very interesting, the four Kumaras, the contamination that they identify as duality in Vaikuṇṭha. So seeing difference in the spiritual dimension. And I was kind of wondering how myself, like maybe not on an institutional level, but on my own personal level, how do I deal with or wrap my head around certain dualities? For example, there's different sampradayas, and then even in our own sampradaya, there's some Ritviks, or there's different groups, and so sometimes I can have a dualistic perspective, or I don't know how to maybe healthily have that, or how to navigate duality within. We're trying to make Vaikuṇṭha, we're trying to make a spiritual world in our temples, in our communities. So, yeah, could you help me with some insight on that?
Yeah, this material world, it's the world of duality, as converse to the spiritual world, which there's just Krishna, there's everybody serving Krishna, everyone's on the same page. Versus here, we find that so many people, they're on a different page, right? So many so many people, they're endeavoring in so many different ways, like you were describing. So, especially in this material world, we should be very, very careful, because if we simply have the mindset and the consciousness of, everything's all good, everything's the same, I'm going to see everything which is dual in this material world just simply with a completely non-dualistic outlook, in the sense that, like I was saying, everything's equally as good, everything's equally as important. For one who's completely Krishna conscious, they're able to see that there isn't a difference between matter and spirit, that everything can be used in relationship to Krishna. But for one, in this material world, we should very much use our intelligence to be able to discriminate on the basis of what the Guru says, on what the Shastra says, on what the assembled devotees are saying. And one should be very clear to see, okay, this is something that's favorable, this is something that's unfavorable, right? All of our acharyas, what they've done is they've accepted what is favorable for devotional service and they've rejected that which is unfavorable. So for something like you were standing the same level of spiritual practice as just any other devotee, anyway, they're all devotees, we're all devotees, can't we just chant Hare Krishna and be happy, right? But this world is described as danger at every single step. And even in spheres of spiritual life, we can take these different contaminations with us. So we should be very, very careful, actually, very, very careful, and have a strong sense of discrimination of what is favorable and what is not favorable. And we should use everything that's favorable in worshiping Krishna, serving the devotees, and very, very careful to reject anything that's unfavorable. Obviously, there's so many different situations. For specific situations, we should inquire from senior devotees and ask, okay, is this something that's favorable or is this something that's detrimental? Because in the Vaikuṇṭha planets, like we're hearing about, there is no lust, there is no anger, there is no greed in the material sense that we find it here. So it isn't that you should say, oh, there's a non-dualistic outlook here, I'm feeling dualistic, but it's just that these things that are favorable, which we should accept, that's all that exists in the spiritual world. There isn't anything unfavorable for Krishna consciousness there in the spiritual world. So before we can get to that level where we can use everything favorable in Krishna service, we first have to be very, very strict, very, very deep in understanding, okay, is this something that's favorable? Is this something that's unfavorable? I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that question. Chandan?
One very important point to amongst all this is that the spiritual master plays a big role in it, in the sense that, Shastra, the spiritual master who's rooted in Shastra is proper. You should find that this is what we hear in Bhagavad Gita and the Shastra. We find the spiritual master who's going to give us complete knowledge, and then we accept that as total. And you accept that person's, what he's teaching, the culture he's teaching, all of those things, and then one judges everything. So like you're saying, there's Ritviks, bogus. There's no middle ground. Yeah. There's no gray line here. So the spiritual master gives us the vision by which we can draw clear conclusions, black and white. And then we have the other sampradayas, bona fide, yes. Who is bona fide? Why are they bona fide? All these things we should be very clear about, because they can cause havoc in our society if we're not clear. Oh yeah, the Ritviks can come and the devotees can come, devotees who are within the line of the parampara properly can come and we can all get together and do kirtan. No, we can't do kirtan together. You're killing the parampara. I don't want to live with someone that rejects anything outside of, where you might say Rupa Goswami or Srila or whatever. This is against our teachings. So we don't want to do kirtan with such people. We don't want to hear from such people. So we have to be very strict, and often we hear, and if we read this Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, callous It seems very callous, like I think even Guru Maharaj was saying in that last class that he gave, that it seems very callous to just let go of your kids and wife and just leave. But one has to be callous in spiritual life to some extent. Not that one becomes hard-hearted, but one has to learn how to distinguish very clearly, and then also have the strength of heart to stick to it when circumstances come in which we may need, societally it may look like, we should waver and maybe just adjust to the society, but no, it's not adjust to the society, but keep in parampara. See things very clearly as they are. And know that if we're rooted in that we'll never lose, that Krishna is always protect us. So we should see things in line of what the acharyas are teaching us, and that's the only vision we see. And we don't give a damn what anybody else says. And they may say, you guys are like this, you guys are cultish, you guys are this. We don't care at all, because we know we're following the parampara like that. So it should be therefore reading Prabhupada's books constantly is so important, and then hearing from a bona fide spiritual master and trying to adjust our life according to what he wants us to do. That's the only purpose of our life. So when we're able to do that, then we'll see that how to use everything in Krishna's service properly.
I mean, these things that appear as duality, they are not dual if one can understand what is influenced by the spiritual energy and what is influenced by the material energy. How do you understand that? One has to have a clear understanding of one has to have a very clear philosophical understanding, and one should be guided by those who have such proper understanding. Otherwise, it's impossible to understand. One may think of it as duality, when it's not actually duality. As we were discussing in multiple ways, from one perspective, the Kumaras were incorrect in seeing this as a duality. But from another perspective, they were right. And because such a contradiction exists is the reason why this is directly influenced by the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, such a contradiction cannot exist. But for us, both perspectives are important because both have lessons for us. We have lesson to learn how the Kumaras are right. We have lesson to learn how the Kumaras were maybe a bit hasty in coming to their conclusions. And to understand such things within the Vaishnava community, within devotional community, within our sampradaya, other sampradayas, requires proper guidance. It requires good association. One has to take shelter of those who properly represent Srila Prabhupada, who properly they strictly follow Srila Prabhupada. And that can be seen by their adherence to Srila Prabhupada's instructions and in being able to understand how Srila Prabhupada is following his spiritual master and so on. That's the way to do it. It's interesting how by following Srila Prabhupada we understand other sampradayas. It's really incredible. But I mean, I have personal experience of understanding such contradictions. Initially I was thinking, we're told that Krishna won't accept, bhoga that's offered by somebody who is not chanting 16 rounds. It's not considered. He will accept if the person is making progress in order to give mercy to such a person. But those who are 16 rounders, they would want to take prasadam from another 16 rounder. And then how do you understand other sampradayas not even chanting Hare Krishna? It's like, where do you go with that? Well, they have to. Are they following their acharya? If they are, then Krishna is accepting. because he's given another process there. But we have to stick to one process. Anyway, so many details can be discussed, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's prasadam time, so we can end there. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.